I was in my final year of medical school when my grandfather was rushed to the emergency room. We were at a dining table eating dinner together as a family when he felt a sharp pain in his left shoulder. The first test the doctor sent off was troponins, the blood marker that, when raised, indicates a heart attack. Family couldn't enter the patient area, and so we waited outside the ER's double doors. My mom paced up and down the hallway. My grandma wrung her hands. Every time a doctor walked out, I stood up, only to have them turn and approach another family. I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove home, picked up my scrubs, and slipped silently back into the ER. Chaos, beeping machines, scurrying medics, moaning patients. When I finally found my grandpa, he was lying there, calm as an angel. Yeah, I called. You're here, he said, surprised, taking in me and my scrubs. Then he beamed at me. Don't worry, he even winked. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. His cheer only deepened my sense of helplessness. I found a nurse and asked to see his results. His ECG was abnormal. His troponins were raised. The results had been sitting there for half an hour, and nobody had told us anything. My grandfather was at risk of a heart attack, and he was just left lying there on the cold, hard bed. As the only one in my family with medical training, and the only one who had made it past the ER doors, I felt like it was on me to make sure Grandpa was going to be okay. I begged to see an attending doctor who told me we had to wait for the second set of troponins to be out before we could do anything. It was a Friday evening. The cardiologist in charge had gone home. Since my grandpa wasn't complaining of active chest pain, he would be fine, they said. Before I could interject, the attending turned around and left. I returned to my grandpa's bedside, shaken. Every sign pointed to an impending heart attack. I knew how to speak the language of medicine, yet I had no voice in that room. Please raise your hand if you felt something like that before, either about your own condition or maybe that of someone you love. I see you. So many of us here have felt ignored or simply unseen by the systems that were built to care for us. I've been there as a worried granddaughter, and I'll be honest, I've also been at the other side of the table. As a doctor, stretched so thin, I was robbed of my ability to do the most human thing, which is to pause, listen, and offer comfort. There is a concept I hope to share with everyone today: infinite humanity. The idea that within each of us, there is a capacity for presence and empathy that does not run out. Not a finite resource to be rationed across a 12-hour shift, but something deeper, something that gets uncovered when we slow down and truly show up for the person in front of us. Today, I want to talk about how we can find our way back to that. And I believe that the most powerful way to do so is through telling stories. If you think about it, we live in an era of extraordinary medical progress. We sequenced the entire human genome, we developed mRNA vaccines in less than a year during COVID-19, and now we're teaching AI to detect cancers earlier than humans ever could. In the long arc of medical history, we've never been better equipped to heal. And yet, patients still leave consultations feeling unheard. Families pace the hallways of hospitals, hoping someone will come out and tell them something. Anything. People still feel like numbers in a system, problems to be processed and discharged. Somewhere along the way, we started optimizing for the wrong things. Efficiency, shorter consultations, faster turnarounds, performance metrics, patient volumes, hospital ratings. These things, they are important, but in relentlessly pursuing them, we lost track of what matters most. Time to sit with a patient, to not just ask, what is wrong, but how are you? And I want to clarify. I understand why. The trade offs are real. A doctor who listens in earnest to one patient is the very same doctor who keeps the next one waiting. These are hard decisions we're making, but often by default, without realizing what it is we're truly giving up. Take the patient whose chart says non-compliant. Now, her story, if you listened, was that she couldn't afford to fill the prescriptions for that month, but she was too ashamed to say so. A machine cannot uncover that. An algorithm cannot sit with her in that shame. Modern medicine requires no advanced technology. It requires a simple, radical act of being willing to listen. The way back begins with stories, not as a soft alternative to clinical rigor, but its very foundation. It changes the way we notice. It changes the questions we think to ask. When a patient tells you their story, they're reaching across the table and saying, please see me. In that moment, they're no longer bed 15 or the case of thyroid cancer. They become someone with a fear they've carried for years, a favorite meal, a grandchild they want to see again. That is what empathy is. Not pity, not performance, but the quiet moment where someone else's life starts to matter to you the way your own does. And stories become the most essential precisely when medicine reaches its limits. One study found that in ICU settings, physicians meet treatment recommendations in line with patient preferences in only 8% of the time. 8%. We can keep bodies alive longer than ever, but we're still failing at the most fundamental question, which is, what does this person in front of me actually want? A story answers that. It points us towards what someone values, what they're willing to trade, what they refuse to lose, and what they'll defend with their very lives. A chance to attend the daughter's wedding, a morning without pain, one last trip home. That is where the infinite humanity lives. Back home in Singapore, I write patient stories for the Straits Times, raising awareness about rising cancer rates in young people and giving voice to communities rarely heard from, like children with Down syndrome and special needs. One morning, I woke up to an email in my inbox. It was from a mom who had read a piece I had written about children with Down syndrome. For years, she said, every single conversation with every doctor started the same way. A list of deficits, behavioral problems, developmental delays, health risks. Yet, reading my piece, she reflected that she saw her son in the kids I wrote about. Stubborn, with a wicked sense of humor, as she described him. Not as diagnosis, but real people with quirks and personalities. For the first time in that moment, she was simply a mom who loved her kid, instead of a caregiver burdened by circumstance. I sat with her email for a long time. I had written that piece believing in the power of stories. But that moment, I understood something more specific. That the right story, when told carefully, can reach through the page and find someone in their loneliness. In bearing witness to her story, I had found something within myself, a sense of purpose I hadn't known how to name until then. So, what should we actually do? I want to share some examples of best practices. Let me first introduce you to this man. His name is Kenneth Schwartz, and he was a healthcare journalist who was dying of lung cancer in the 1990s. In one of his last pieces, he wrote about the small moments of connections that had sustained him in his last days. His question to us was this: could we cultivate these moments instead of leaving them to chance? And that was how Schwartz rounds were born. In hospitals all around the world, clinical staff, including doctors, nurses, social workers, gather together every month, not to discuss clinical cases, but to talk about the patients they've met and how they've been affected. To say, this man gave me a fresh perspective. That kid broke my heart. There's a granny that I still think about sometimes on the drive home. Because of medicine, you don't say these things. You carry them with you, quietly, alone. And then you move on to the next patient. There's no room in the system for sentimentality. But Schwartz rounds, they counter that narrative. Yet initiatives like these can't take place until the structural conditions allow for them. To do so, two changes make a real difference: time and training. The average clinical consultation lasts for just 7 minutes, and patients get interrupted by doctors within 11 seconds of them speaking. Let's take a step back. So imagine yourself. You go on a first date with someone. The both of you arrive at a restaurant, sit down opposite each other, and immediately the clock begins ticking. You have 7 minutes on the dot. You begin by introducing yourself, your favorite hobbies, food, but no, he cuts you off at just 11 seconds. How do you think that date went? I think we all know the answer. It might seem funny, but this is the reality that patients all around the world are experiencing on a daily basis. Healthcare systems are already starting to realize that it's a problem. Some are offering longer first consultations, while others are separating story gathering visits from procedural ones. These are encouraging moves in the right direction. Yet, what matters is not just how much time we have, but what we do with that time. Which brings me to education. Narrative medicine, which is teaching students to listen to the story behind what a patient says, is already being woven into the curriculum. Yet in too many medical schools, it remains an elective, a nice to have, and a side to the real subjects. Now that has to change if we're serious about making healthcare human again. The next generation of doctors should graduate knowing how to read a patient the way they read a scan, with care, with attention, and with the understanding that what isn't said is often just as important as what is. Let us go back to what we always knew. Long before the CT scan, long before the patient chart, there were just two people. One who told a story, and the other who carefully listened. Going back to the story about my grandpa, I never told you about how that night ended. His second set of troponins came back raised. His chest discomfort worsened. He was rushed into the emergency operating theater for a procedure because he did end up having a heart attack. Thankfully, a week later, he recovered and he was discharged. We were back at the same dining table, eating dinner together as a family. Now, here's what etched itself into me. It wasn't the abnormal ECG, it wasn't a raised troponins, it wasn't even the dread or the fear. It was the moment I found him in that crowded ER, the way he looked at me and my scrubs and said, "You're here." Not, "Is this serious?" Not, "Will I be okay?" Just, "You're here." Because in that moment, being there was enough. And that is what every patient in every waiting room, every hospital corridor, every clinical consultation is asking of us. Not presence, not perfection, just presence. Healthcare was never meant to be faceless. We built these systems to serve people, and people have always made sense of their lives through stories. That infinite humanity I spoke about in the beginning, the one that does not run out, is waiting there. We can make healthcare human again, in every honest conversation, in every story told and truly heard. So I urge you, tell the story, listen to the story, and please, let the story change you. Thank you.